The cruelest people are often the ones who think they already know your ending. Emily Carter stepped into the restaurant at exactly 7:12 p.m., smoothing one hand over the sleeve of her navy dress as the maitre d' welcomed her inside. The place was the kind of Manhattan restaurant where conversation stayed low, silverware gleamed beneath warm amber lighting, and every table looked like it belonged in a magazine. Emily had spent 10 full minutes outside deciding whether to walk in at all. Not because she was underdressed, not because she didn't belong, but because tonight mattered in a way almost no one knew. "Miss Carter," the hostess said with a professional smile, checking the reservation list. "Right this way." Emily nodded, her throat a little tight. She followed the hostess past tables filled with couples, business dinners, and carefully arranged glasses of wine, reminding herself to breathe evenly. Just get through tonight. That was all. One dinner, one conversation, one important reason for being here. Then a voice sliced through the room like it had been waiting years for this exact moment. "Well, this is unexpected." Emily stopped walking. She knew that voice immediately. Some sounds don't leave your memory, no matter how much time passes. Slowly, she turned. Jason Whitmore leaned back in his chair 20 feet away, one arm draped casually over the backrest, a smug smile already forming. Across from him sat a younger woman in an elegant white blouse, glossy hair, expensive jewelry, and the expression of someone enjoying front-row entertainment. Emily's stomach tightened, but her face remained still. Jason let out a laugh just loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Emily," he said, raising his eyebrows dramatically. "I honestly didn't expect to see you in a place like this." A few nearby diners glanced over. Emily could already feel it, that uncomfortable social electricity when strangers sense drama but pretend not to listen. The hostess shifted awkwardly beside her. Emily considered the easiest option. Leave. Turn around. Walk out. Call the night a loss. But she couldn't. Not tonight. Jason sat forward, enjoying her silence. "Don't tell me," he said. "Special occasion? Coupon night." His date laughed into her glass. Not loudly. Just enough. Emily looked at him steadily. 3 years. 3 years since the divorce, and somehow he still knew exactly how to weaponize a room. Jason had always loved an audience. In private, he preferred subtle criticism disguised as concern. In public, he preferred charm. Apparently tonight, he'd chosen performance. "Jason," Emily said calmly, her voice even. "Good evening." That should have ended it. Adults exchange brief discomfort, then move on. But Jason wasn't interested in adulthood. "Wow," he said, shaking his head theatrically. "Still doing that composed thing. Impressive." His date smiled politely, clearly trying to decode history she only partially understood. Emily noticed the way the woman leaned toward Jason, the quiet confidence of someone who believed she had won something valuable. Emily almost pitied her. Almost. "Your table is ready, Miss Carter," the hostess said gently. Emily nodded. But as she began to move, Jason raised his voice again. "Hey," he called. "You sure you can afford the entrees here? Inflation's rough." A couple at the next table exchanged glances. Someone farther back stopped mid-conversation. Emily felt heat rise in her chest, not from embarrassment exactly, but from disbelief that a grown man would still need this. Jason smiled the way some people do when they mistake cruelty for wit. "Relax," he added. "I'm joking." Emily turned fully toward him now. "Are you?" she asked. The question landed softly, but Jason's expression flickered for half a second before recovering. His date shifted in her seat. "Jason told me you two were married," she said, voice light but curious. "Small world." Emily offered a polite nod. "It is." Jason grinned. "Emily always hated fancy restaurants when we were together." That was a lie. A casual one. The kind he used to tell so often he probably believed them himself. Emily had loved places like this. She had simply stopped suggesting them after years of hearing reasons why her preferences were impractical, expensive, unnecessary, silly. "People change," Emily said. "Do they?" Jason replied. His tone sharpened just enough to reveal something under the performance. Something less playful. Something personal. "Because from where I'm sitting, you look exactly the same." Emily knew what he meant. Not appearance. Position. In his mind, she was still the woman he could define with a sentence. Still the woman who would quietly absorb whatever version of reality he offered. But tonight, for reasons Jason couldn't possibly understand yet, Emily wasn't here to revisit old damage. And she definitely wasn't leaving. Jason gave that familiar half-smile, the one that used to make other people think he was charming, and Emily think carefully before speaking. Still quiet, he said, lifting his water glass. That has not changed. Emily held his gaze for one measured second, then turned back toward the hostess. Please, she said, lead the way. The hostess nodded quickly, relieved by the possibility that the moment might end. Emily followed her deeper into the restaurant. But even as she walked, she could feel eyes following her. Curiosity was powerful. Public discomfort was even stronger. She was seated at a corner table with a clear view of the dining room, but enough privacy to suggest discretion. The hostess handed her a menu. Your guest has not arrived yet, she said softly. Would you like sparkling or still water? Still, thank you. Emily placed her bag beside her chair and exhaled slowly once the hostess stepped away. Her pulse was elevated, but her expression remained calm. She had learned long ago that some people fed on visible reactions. Jason had always treated emotion like leverage. If you looked hurt, he pressed harder. If you defended yourself, he repositioned the story until you sounded unstable. If you stayed quiet, he called you cold. It had taken Emily years to understand that some conversations were designed to be unwinnable. A server arrived with water, and Emily thanked him with a polite smile. Her hand brushed the edge of the folded card in her bag, checking without looking that it was still there. That mattered. She glanced at the time. 7:19 p.m. Still early. Still manageable. So, came Jason's voice from farther across the room, carrying just enough to reach her without appearing deliberate. You never answered me. Emily closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. The woman with him was looking over now with open curiosity. Jason had shifted in his seat so he could see Emily directly. Answered what? Emily asked without raising her voice. What brings you here? Jason said. Business meeting? Secret millionaire lifestyle. His date laughed again, softer this time, less certain. Emily folded her hands. Dinner. At this place. Jason tilted his head. Interesting. The woman finally spoke directly. Jason, she said with an uneasy smile. Maybe let her eat? I am being friendly, Jason replied. Emily and I go way back. Emily almost smiled at that phrasing. Go way back. As though history were a charming anecdote instead of a long lesson in emotional erosion. Sophia, Emily guessed. Jason always chose women who looked as though they belonged in expensive skincare ads. It was not the appearance that struck Emily. It was the predictability, the performance of reinvention. Jason had always needed external proof that he was winning some invisible competition. Emily lifted her glass and took a sip of water. She would not be pulled into this. Not tonight. But silence can provoke people who need control. You know, Jason said, leaning back. Emily used to hate social settings like this. Another lie. That is not true, Emily said evenly. Jason raised both hands. See? She talks. Sophia shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should focus on our dinner. I am fine, Jason said. Are you? Emily asked before she could stop herself. The words landed cleanly. Sophia looked between them. Jason's jaw tightened for a fraction of a second, then relaxed. I am fantastic, he said. Life has been very good. Emily nodded as though acknowledging weather. That is nice. He clearly wanted more. A challenge. Defensiveness. Any sign she was emotionally available for the old dance. Instead, she reached for the menu. Her phone vibrated silently against her bag. A message. She did not check it yet. Jason continued. I always wondered what happened after. Emily looked up. After what? After the divorce. He said the word lightly, as though discussing canceled travel plans. You kind of disappeared. Emily almost laughed at the selective memory. Disappeared. As though recovery were a vanishing act rather than painstaking reconstruction. There had been months after the divorce where ordinary decisions felt impossible. Grocery shopping alone felt unfamiliar. Choosing paint colors for a smaller apartment felt absurdly emotional. Opening mail without anxiety took time. Relearning her own preferences had taken even longer. Jason had managed every visible financial decision during their marriage, always with the explanation that he was better at it. Faster, more rational, more strategic. Emily had believed competence looked like confidence. She had mistaken control for structure. It was only later, in quieter conversations with wiser people, that she began naming things accurately. Not dramatic abuse. Not scandal. Just the slow narrowing of another person's confidence until asking permission felt normal. Emily, Jason prompted. She realized he was waiting. I built a life, she said simply. That sounds vague. Not everything is your business. Sophia looked down at her plate, perhaps. Recognizing for the first time that the entertaining ex-wife story had layers she had not been told. Jason smiled thinly. Defensive. Boundaries, Emily corrected. A nearby couple had clearly stopped pretending not to listen. Jason noticed, and Emily could practically see him recalibrating. An audience sharpened him. He preferred rooms where he could appear effortlessly superior. Come on, he said, voice louder now. We were married. I think I can ask how you ended up here. Emily's phone vibrated again. This time she glanced down discreetly. A short message. Running 5 minutes behind. See you soon. Relief flickered through her chest. Good. Everything was still on track. I ended up here because I chose to be here, Emily said. Jason laughed. That was not my question. It was the answer you got. Sophia cleared her throat. Jason. He ignored her. Do you remember that little Italian place in Brooklyn you loved? Emily said nothing. You used to say one day you wanted to go somewhere truly elegant. Crystal glasses. White tablecloths. Real tasting menus. He smirked. Funny where ambition leads. Emily stared at him. The astonishing thing about certain people was not that they lied. It was how casually they rewrote moments they had actively shaped. She remembered that conversation. She remembered suggesting that restaurant years ago. She remembered him saying it was wasteful and pretentious. She remembered apologizing for bringing it up. People do eventually get to the places they once imagined, Emily said. Jason tilted his head. That almost sounded meaningful. It was. Just not for him. Across the room, the maitre d' checked the entrance again. Emily noticed. So did the server who had delivered her water. Small signals. Professional timing. The rhythm of a planned evening still moving beneath this disruption. Jason followed her gaze. Waiting for someone? Emily looked back at him. Yes. This I have to hear. You do not. A date. Sophia's expression changed slightly. Interesting. Emily almost felt sympathy for her again. A meeting, Emily said. At night. In this place. Mysterious. Jason leaned forward. What kind of meeting? Emily smiled politely. The kind that does not involve you. A nearby diner hid a grin behind his napkin. Jason noticed that too. His posture shifted. Pride and irritation were beginning to compete. Good, Emily thought, then immediately corrected herself. No, not good. Dangerous. Jason often escalated when he felt publicly challenged. Which meant the next few minutes mattered. Because if he sensed he was losing control of the narrative, he would push harder. And judging by the expression on his face, he already had something in mind. Jason leaned back in his chair with the expression of someone who believed patience was optional, because eventually the world would provide entertainment. Emily recognized that look. It usually came right before he crossed a line and called it honesty. Sophia picked up her wine glass, but she was no longer smiling the same way. The easy amusement from earlier had faded into uncertainty. Good instincts, Emily thought. A meeting, Jason repeated, louder than necessary. That sounds serious. Emily returned her attention to the menu, giving him nothing. Should I be impressed? He asked. That depends, Emily said calmly. On what? Whether your goal is understanding or performance. A few people at nearby tables definitely heard that. Jason smiled, but it looked tighter now. Performance? Emily, you make me sound theatrical. You are speaking to someone across a restaurant. Sophia set her glass down. Jason, maybe enough. I am just having a conversation. No, Sophia said carefully. You are having something. Jason ignored her. He stood, adjusting the cuff of his jacket with exaggerated composure, then took several slow steps toward Emily's table. That changed the room immediately. Conversations softened. Forks paused. The social line between awkward and intrusive had been crossed. Emily looked up at him, her expression unreadable. Sit down, Jason, she said quietly. Why? He asked. Because this is embarrassing. For who? Emily held his gaze. That depends how much farther you plan to go. Jason laughed, but the sound did not land the way he expected. You always did this. Did what? Act superior when you had nothing. Emily folded her hands. That is an interesting sentence. Is it inaccurate? Very. Jason glanced around as though inviting witnesses. Emily was always dramatic about practical things. Money. Expectations. Lifestyle. I was the realistic one. A man at the next table frowned slightly. Sophia spoke from her seat. Jason. He waved a dismissive hand without turning. She wanted fairy tale dinners, impossible plans, all kinds of things that did not match reality. Emily almost responded. Almost. But she had learned that defending yourself against a distorted version of your life often only validates the premise that debate is required. Instead, she asked, why are you doing this? The question was simple. Genuine, even. Jason blinked, thrown off for a moment. Doing what? Trying to make a public event out of a private history. He shrugged. Maybe I am curious. No, Emily said softly. Curiosity asks questions. This is something else. The couple nearby exchanged another glance. A server approached cautiously, perhaps prepared to intervene, but Jason smiled at him in that polished, socially acceptable way that made direct confrontation difficult. Everything is great, Jason said smoothly. Just reconnecting with an old friend. The server looked at Emily. Ms. Carter? I am fine, she said. The server nodded, though his hesitation suggested uncertainty. Jason caught the use of her name. Interesting, he said after the server walked away. Staff knows you. Emily did not answer. Regular here? Still silence. That would surprise me. Sophia stood halfway from her chair, then sat back down. She was watching Jason now the way people watch someone revealing themselves unexpectedly. You know, Jason continued, lowering his voice slightly, but not enough. The funny thing is, I used to worry about you. Emily almost laughed at the audacity. Did you? Sure. You were never exactly independent. There it was. Not just mockery. Revision. The old architecture of control rebuilt sentence by sentence. Emily leaned back. You seem deeply invested in a version of me that no longer exists. Jason smiled thinly. That sounds rehearsed. That sounds accurate. So what changed, he asked. You read a few self-help books? Sophia closed her eyes briefly. Even she looked embarrassed now. Emily glanced at the entrance again. No sign yet. A minute stretched longer than expected when someone like Jason occupied it. You should go back to your table, Emily said. You really think you can dismiss me? I think adults recognize boundaries. And I think, Jason said, leaning closer. You are pretending confidence because you do not want anyone to know you are still exactly where I left you. Silence. Real silence this time. The kind where even strangers become emotionally present. Emily looked at him steadily, and for the first time all evening, something in her expression shifted. Not hurt, not anger. Something closer to disbelief mixed with certainty. Jason mistook it for weakness. That was his biggest habit. Misreading composure. You should not have said that, Emily said quietly. Jason smiled. Why? Because it is true. Before Emily could answer, a sharply dressed man in a dark suit emerged from the far side of the dining room, scanning the room with immediate purpose. Jason noticed him only after Emily did. The man moved with the kind of quiet confidence that came from being entirely certain where he belonged. Mid-40s, tailored charcoal suit, composed posture, the kind of presence that caused staff to subtly adjust their attention without being told. Jason straightened immediately, clearly assuming the interruption would validate whatever story he had constructed in his head. Emily remained seated. The man approached their table, glanced once at Jason, then focused entirely on Emily with unmistakable warmth. Miss Carter, he said, extending his hand. I am so sorry for the delay. Daniel Reeves. Emily stood and shook his hand. No apology necessary. Daniel's expression shifted as he took in the atmosphere around the table. He was observant enough to recognize social tension in less than 2 seconds. I hope you have not been waiting long. Not too long, Emily said. Jason gave a small laugh, stepping half a pace closer. So she does no management. Daniel turned politely. And you are? Jason Whitmore. He offered a hand. Daniel shook it with neutral professionalism. Pleasure. Jason smiled in a way Emily knew too well. I was beginning to think Emily might be in the wrong place. Daniel paused just long enough for the sentence to feel awkward. She is exactly where she is supposed to be. The silence that followed landed harder than Emily expected. Jason blinked. Sophia looked openly confused now. Right? Jason said, recovering. I just meant this is a fairly exclusive place. Daniel's expression did not change. Yes. One word. Perfectly polite. Entirely unhelpful. Emily almost admired him immediately. "We are ready whenever you are," Daniel said to Emily. Jason frowned slightly. "We?" Daniel looked back at Emily. "Your guest is on the way, but everything is prepared." Jason's attention sharpened. "Guest?" Emily simply picked up her water glass. Daniel continued. "Would you prefer the private room now, or would you like to remain here until everyone arrives?" Jason's face shifted almost imperceptibly. "Private room," Sophia repeated softly from across the room. Daniel glanced at her, then back to Emily, leaving the question entirely in Emily's control. "I can wait here," Emily said. "Thank you." "Of course." Daniel nodded, then lowered his voice slightly. "The chef asked me personally to tell you he is honored you accepted tonight." Jason's expression changed in a way Emily had waited years to see. Not humiliation exactly. Disorientation. The kind that appears when reality refuses to match a preferred narrative. "Accepted," Jason repeated. Daniel looked at him briefly, then returned to Emily. "If you need anything at all, please let us know." "Thank you, Daniel." He gave a small nod and walked away. Not rushed. Not theatrical. Just calm professionalism. But the impact remained hanging in the air long after he left. Jason stared at Emily. "What was that?" Emily sat down. "A conversation." "Do not do that." "Do what?" "That vague thing." Emily folded her napkin into her lap. "I am having dinner." Sophia stood and crossed the distance between their tables, slower this time, no longer a spectator enjoying a scene. "Jason," she said, "what exactly is going on?" "Nothing," he said too quickly. Emily noticed that. Sophia did too. That did not look like nothing. Jason forced a laugh. Apparently, Emily has become very important in restaurant circles. Emily said nothing. Silence was doing more work now than explanation ever could. Sophia looked directly at Emily. "Do you work with them?" Emily answered honestly. "Not exactly." Jason seized on that. "See, Jason," Sophia said, "stop trying to interpret everything before anyone finishes a sentence." That landed. Emily almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "I think maybe you should both enjoy your dinner," Emily said. Sophia remained where she was. "He told me you struggled after the divorce." Jason's jaw tightened instantly. Emily met Sophia's eyes. "Did he?" "He said he worried about you." Emily gave the smallest smile. "That sounds like Jason." "Meaning?" Sophia asked. Emily chose her words carefully. Meaning, concern, and control can sound similar if you are hearing them from the wrong person. Jason laughed too loudly. "Okay, now we are rewriting history." "No," Emily said. "History tends to stay where it is." Sophia looked between them again, processing. Jason said the separation was mutual. Emily took a sip of water. "That depends how one defines mutual." Jason stepped in immediately. "Sophia, seriously? I am asking questions." "At dinner?" "In public?" she asked, pointedly glancing around the room. That one hit harder than anything Emily had said all evening. Jason exhaled through his nose. "You are overreacting." Sophia crossed her arms. "Am I?" Emily checked the time again. 7:31 p.m. Still not here. "Fine." Daniel reappeared briefly near the host's stand, speaking quietly with staff. A subtle but noticeable shift had happened in the room. People were trying not to stare now, which somehow made the awareness more obvious. Jason noticed it too. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Everyone is acting like something happened." Emily looked at him. "Something did." "What?" "You chose to publicly humiliate someone based on assumptions." "Humiliate?" Jason scoffed. "That is dramatic." "Is it?" Jason looked around, perhaps seeking social confirmation, but no one was smiling with him anymore. That realization clearly unsettled him. "You always loved framing things emotionally," he muttered. "And you always loved dismissing emotion as irrational." Jason shook his head. "You sound like therapy." Emily smiled faintly. "That is because therapy can be useful." Sophia let out the smallest involuntary laugh, quickly covering it. Jason stared at her. "Seriously? I did not mean to." "Sure." Emily watched the dynamic shift with detached clarity. This was familiar in structure, unfamiliar in outcome. Jason losing narrative control often redirected pressure toward the nearest available person. Sophia seemed to realize that in real time. "Did you tell me the full story?" she asked him quietly. "There is no full story." Emily almost spoke, then chose not to. Daniel approached again, this time accompanied by a server carrying a small tray. "Compliments of the chef," Daniel said, placing an elegant appetizer in front of Emily. A welcome course while you wait. Jason stared. Sophia stared. Emily blinked, surprised but composed. That is very kind. He insisted. Daniel smiled. And your guest has just arrived. Emily turned toward the entrance instinctively. Jason followed her gaze. So did Sophia. A distinguished woman in her 60s entered the restaurant wearing a beautifully tailored cream jacket, carrying herself with effortless confidence. Daniel moved immediately to greet her with the same unmistakable respect he had shown Emily. Jason frowned. Who was that? Emily stood slowly, her expression changing for the first time into something unmistakably sincere. Relief, respect, readiness. The reason I am here, she said. The woman entered with the kind of presence that did not require volume to command attention. Her silver blonde hair was neatly styled, her posture straight, her expression warm but discerning. Daniel greeted her with immediate familiarity, and she smiled before her eyes moved across the dining room and landed on Emily. There you are, she said, her voice carrying just enough to reach the table. Emily stepped forward, and for the first time all evening, her composure softened into something genuinely personal. Margaret, she said warmly. They embraced briefly, the kind of greeting built on trust rather than performance. Jason stared openly now. Sophia stood beside him, her confusion shifting toward realization that she had entered a story halfway through and been given the wrong script. Margaret turned toward the table. I hope I am not terribly late. Midtown traffic behaves like it has personal grievances. Emily smiled. You are perfectly fine. Daniel spoke with quiet professionalism. Your private room is ready whenever you would like. Margaret nodded. Wonderful. Jason cleared his throat. I am sorry, he said, forcing casual confidence back into his voice, but I feel like I am missing context. Margaret looked at him politely. And you are? Jason Whitmore. Margaret Holloway. The name meant nothing to Jason immediately. Emily noticed the pause. Sophia, however, reacted first. Holloway, she repeated softly. Margaret gave her a courteous smile. Yes. Sophia looked at Emily, then back to Margaret. As in the Holloway Foundation? Margaret nodded once. That would be the family name, yes. Jason's expression changed again. This time the confusion was sharper. Emily could almost hear the mental recalculations. The Holloway Foundation was well known in New York philanthropic and educational circles. Scholarship initiatives, women's leadership programs, community development funding, art support. Even people only loosely connected to nonprofit work recognized the name. Jason forced a laugh. Small world. Margaret's eyes moved calmly between faces, quickly reading more than anyone was saying aloud. Is this a private conversation I have interrupted? Emily answered smoothly. Not intentionally. Margaret's expression sharpened by a fraction. Daniel remained nearby, tactfully present without intruding. Jason adjusted his jacket. Emily never mentioned connections like this. Margaret looked at Emily. I imagine Emily has many things she has never felt obligated to mention. Sophia actually smiled at that. Jason did not. So, he said, how do you two know each other? Margaret answered before Emily could. Emily serves on our advisory initiative for women rebuilding professional careers after major life transitions. Silence. Full, unmistakable silence. Jason stared at Emily as though she had switched identities in front of him. What? Margaret continued, not unkindly. She has done exceptional work. Sophia turned fully toward Emily now. You work with the foundation. Emily spoke simply. I mentor participants and help design programming. Jason laughed once, but there was no humor in it. Since when? Emily met his eyes. A while. You never told me. Margaret's expression cooled almost imperceptibly. I suspect that statement may be less meaningful than you intended. Jason ignored her. You are on some board? Advisory initiative. Emily corrected gently. That is not the point. Then what is? Emily asked. He opened his mouth, then stopped. Sophia folded her arms. I would also like to know. Margaret looked at Emily. Would you prefer privacy? It was a graceful offer. An exit. Emily considered it. She could walk away now. She had every right to. But something about the room, the accumulated weight of Jason's assumptions, the years of being defined by his version of events, made clarity feel less like retaliation and more like correction. No, Emily said calmly. I think this is manageable. Margaret gave the smallest approving nod. Jason exhaled sharply. This is unbelievable. What is? Emily asked. This whole image. Emily almost smiled. Image. This successful, composed reinvention. It is not reinvention. Really? Jason said. Because this is not the woman I knew. Emily's answer came without hesitation. That is because you never paid much attention. Sophia looked down briefly, then back at Jason. Did you know about any of this? Of course not. Why not? Sophia asked. Because apparently she enjoys secrets. Margaret spoke before Emily could. Privacy is not secrecy. Jason laughed bitterly. Right. Daniel shifted slightly as another staff member passed, but remained respectfully nearby. Emily noticed how the restaurant had settled into that strange social stillness where everyone pretended to resume dinner while remaining emotionally invested. Jason, Emily said, what exactly bothers you here? Do not do that. Do what? Turn this into psychology. You brought an audience, Sophia said quietly. That landed hard. Jason looked at her. You are taking her side? Sophia blinked. I am taking observable reality seriously. Margaret almost smiled. Jason rubbed his jaw. Emily struggled after the divorce. Emily answered calmly. Yes. He paused, thrown off by agreement. Then what are we even pretending about? Nothing, Emily said. I did struggle. Margaret placed a light hand on the back of Emily's chair, saying nothing. Emily continued. The difference is that struggling was not the end of the story. Jason looked genuinely unsettled now. You made it sound like I destroyed your life. I did not say that. You implied it. No, Emily said. I said I had to rebuild. Sophia's voice was softer now. From what? Emily looked at her, then answered honestly. From a version of myself that had become very small. Jason scoffed. That is ridiculous. Margaret's expression hardened. Be careful. Jason turned to her. With what? With dismissing experiences you may not understand. He shook his head. This is unbelievable. I supported her. Emily nodded. Financially, yes. Exactly. Support and control are not interchangeable. There it is again. Jason threw up his hands. Everything becomes some profound statement. No, Emily said quietly. Only the things that mattered. Sophia stared at Jason. Did you control the finances? I managed them. Did she have access? That is not the same conversation. Margaret intervened with calm precision. Actually, it may be. Jason looked cornered for the first time. I am not doing this in a restaurant. A man 2 tables away muttered, perhaps unintentionally audible. Bit late for that. Sophia covered her mouth to hide a reaction. Jason flushed. Emily did not move. You asked what changed, she said. Do you want the answer? Jason said nothing. I learned that being uncertain does not mean being incapable. I learned that apologizing for having preferences is not maturity. I learned that rebuilding confidence takes time. And I learned that some people are most comfortable when the version of you they remember is easier to control. Silence again. Sophia looked at Jason as though seeing structural details she had missed. Is that true? She asked him. No, too fast. Too sharp. Margaret glanced at Daniel, who subtly stepped farther back, allowing the conversation space. Sophia, Jason said, softening his tone. You are getting a highly curated version. Sophia gave a short, incredulous laugh. Curated? I watched you mock her for 20 minutes. Jason looked at Emily. You set me up. Emily actually looked surprised. By existing here? By this whole thing. Jason, Margaret said evenly. You seem to believe Emily's professional life was constructed to inconvenience your dinner. Even Sophia laughed at that one. Jason's confidence cracked visibly. That is not what I meant. Emily checked the time. Margaret, we should probably head in soon. Margaret nodded. Yes. Jason took one step forward. Wait. Emily looked at him. What? You cannot just drop all this and walk away. Emily held his gaze. Watch me. Sophia looked at Jason for a long second, then asked the question that finally changed everything. Did your marriage actually end the way you told me it did? Jason opened his mouth. Nothing came out immediately, and in that silence, everyone heard the answer. Sophia held Jason's gaze, waiting. It was astonishing how much silence could reveal when someone had spent years filling every empty space with explanations. Jason opened his mouth, closed it, then forced a brittle laugh that convinced no one. That is not a fair question. Sophia's expression did not change. It is a simple one. Relationships are complicated. That is not an answer. Jason looked at Emily as though she might somehow rescue him from a situation he had personally built. Emily simply picked up her bag. "Margaret," she said gently, "shall we?" Margaret nodded with quiet approval. Jason took another step forward. "Emily." She paused, not because he had authority, but because she chose to. "What?" His voice dropped, stripped now of performance. "So that is it." Emily studied him for a moment, and what she felt surprised even her. Not triumph, not anger, mostly distance. The emotional gravity he once held over her had simply thinned into history. "That depends," she said. "On what?" "On what you think this moment is." Jason shook his head. "Come on." "No," Emily said calmly. "You made assumptions about who I was the second you saw me. You mocked me in public. You treated my silence like weakness. And now you are upset because reality was inconvenient." Sophia exhaled slowly, looking away from Jason. Margaret remained composed, allowing Emily the space to finish in her own time. Jason lowered his voice further. "I was joking." Emily gave the faintest smile. That explanation usually arrives after consequences. A quiet sound of agreement came from somewhere in the dining room. Jason heard it. His shoulders stiffened. "You are really going to do this?" Emily tilted her head slightly. "Do what? Leave me looking like the villain?" Emily's expression remained almost gentle. People usually manage their own reputations. Sophia let out a short breath that might have been disbelief or reluctant admiration. Jason turned toward her. "Sophia." She held up a hand. "Do not." He stared. "Seriously? You humiliated your former wife in public based on a story you created, then expected everyone to laugh with you. That is not what happened." "It is exactly what happened." Jason looked at Emily one last time, searching for something familiar, perhaps the older version of her who might soften the edges for his comfort. He did not find her. "I did care about you," he said. Emily considered that. "I think you cared about the version of me that needed your approval." The sentence landed with clean finality. Margaret touched Emily's arm lightly. "We should go." Emily nodded. Daniel appeared almost instantly, perfectly timed without seeming intrusive. "Right this way." As Emily turned, Jason spoke again, quieter this time. "Emily." She looked back once. "You really think I never knew you?" Emily held his gaze, calm and entirely certain. "I think you knew the version of me that survived you. You never met the one who came after." Then she turned and walked beside Margaret toward the private dining room, Daniel leading the way. No dramatic music. No raised voices. Just the quiet dignity of someone no longer interested in defending her existence. Behind her, Sophia remained where she was, looking at Jason with the unmistakable expression of someone reconsidering everything. Emily did not look back again.